It is round two in our At Home with the Who's conversation with Coach Bruce Arena, presented by the Supply Room, and kind of like his home away from home. He's actually at his office over at Foxborough with us here today. But, Coach, now that you've warmed up, we'll dive right into our next round of questions. And to say that your impact on American soccer has been wide ranging is a gross understatement, as your resume would basically lead anyone to believe. 5 NCAA titles, 5 MLS titles, a pair of World Cup appearances, all under your guidance as a head coach, and Olympic teams. However, many people may not realize that when you first arrived at UVA back in 1978 as a young coach, you weren't necessarily here to coach just soccer, were you?
No, actually, when Gene Corrigan hired me, he told me that make sure that the soccer kids don't get into any trouble, but we want to win a national championship in lacrosse. So I was hired as his head soccer coach and assistant lacrosse coach, and spent 7 to 8 years with Jim Adams, and a great experience. What a outstanding coach Coach Adams was, and I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, and likewise, when you began your career as a player at Cornell following 2 years at Nassau Community College, you had your sights set on playing lacrosse and not soccer. How did you ultimately make the choice to go in the direction you did with a sport that has steered your professional career and really the game in many ways?
Well, I really enjoyed coaching both sports at Virginia. And in the old days, in 1978, when we started, we not only coached our teams, but we also were instructors in the PE department. So we kept pretty busy. But as things moved along in the early 80s, and I learned more about the University of Virginia and the potential there, I really felt that we could build an outstanding program. And I think in 1982, we already made it to the Final Four, or the NCAA semifinals. It wasn't a Final Four then, but the soccer program. And Dick Schultz came in and replaced Gene Corrigan, who went on to Notre Dame and then ultimately became the commissioner of the ACC. And I knew Dick from Cornell. He was the Cornell athletic director. And when I was on my way out of Cornell, Dick was coming in. So we had a little bit of a relationship. And we had conversations, and I said to him, I think ultimately, we need to build a soccer stadium here. And he asked me, what do you think you could do if we built a soccer stadium? And I said, I think one day we can win a national championship. And we got on with the business of trying to fundraise, and we're fortunate that we eventually got the support of Clockton Pentaplast as our lead gift, and Clockton became a reality. And when we opened up Clockton in 91, we happened to have won 4 national championships in a row. So it tied in with I pushed Dick on that. I thought, if you have the facilities in Virginia, you can win. And I believe that in any sport. And since then, we've seen national championships, and I'm going to miss sports, of course. Obviously, men's lacrosse, the basketball championship, which is incredible, baseball, go on and on. Virginia, to me, is one of the rare institutions in our country that have an incredible academic presence and unbelievable potential in athletics. And now to this day, I think Virginia is as good an athletic department as there is in our country. So it's been great to see from the early days when I arrived in 78 to how the athletic department has grown. The facilities are absolutely fantastic, and all the teams are positioned to compete nationally in any sport.
You gave us a little bit of a glimpse into what it was like those early days, but what was soccer like at UVA those early days before Klockner was here, before national championships were here, where you were starting to build this thing up?
Well, I had a budget. My first budget was $7,000. And I remember walking into Jim West's office, who was the associate AD, and I asked him, do I have a budget for recruiting? And he looked at me and didn't quite know. And I remember, we were trying to make ends meet. And I for our opening game, I had 3 brand new Bryan soccer balls, and we played down on the lower field, which is now, I believe, a turf field right on Emmett Street. And the game started, and a ball was kicked down the hill. It went across Emmett Street, and a truck ran over it, and I was down to 2 balls. And I was getting a little bit nervous. So we were really scrapping at that time. But ultimately, we got great support out of the athletic department, where we positioned our team, obviously, to compete nationally. But like every sport in those days, we were just getting a taste of really competing seriously in the ACC in a lot of sports. And certainly the emphasis was always on football and basketball. And then women's basketball was phenomenal then, competing for national championships. But slowly, right across the board, we started getting better. And I'm really grateful for the support I got that allowed me to try to build a nationally competitive soccer program. So over time, we got it done, and it was just simply a great experience.
Yeah, it wasn't just competitive. It was dominant. You won 4 straight national titles, 5 of 6 at one point. The list of the players from some of those teams is incredible. Claudio Reyna, Jeff Aguz, Ben Olsen, John Harkes, Tony Miola. How much fun was it to coach those teams?
We recruited a lot of kids from the Northeast at that time, although we were recruiting a little bit nationally as well. And to this day, I maintain relationships with all those players, and it's absolutely fantastic. And it's very rare that you get the chance to recruit kids like that are exceptional athletically, and use the UVA experience to grow as people and move on in life to be outstanding people. So today, in the sport of soccer, John Harkes is still in the coaching. Miola's doing a lot of things there. Claudio Reyna has just been named the general manager of the new Austin franchise in MLS. A bunch of guys are working for me. They've all accomplished a whole lot. We produce guys that are lawyers today, doctors. Jeff Gaffney, one of the greats, is still in Charlottesville selling a lot of real estate. So it was such an absolutely great experience coaching those athletes and then seeing the way they've grown as people. So for me, and I tell this story often, I've been in a lot of places coaching. My days at Virginia have been my finest and most enjoyable experiences in coaching.
One name I didn't get a chance to mention there is a then young guy by the name of George Geldnevach, now the head coach, of course, here at UVA. He played for you. What was he like as a player?
Well, he was an All-American, and he was a great player, and ultimately became my assistant coach, and then obviously replaced me. And George was powerful. He could run. He was a goal scorer. He was a real competitive guy. But when I got to know George a little bit better, what a good person he was. And to see how he's developed and grown into, he's a veteran coach. And when I visit every now and then and watch him with the team, I can't be any more proud of a person. He's developed into one of the premier coaches in the United States in the sport, and he's just done a fantastic job. And it's great to see. And I think the sport of Virginia is in fabulous shape, and George has done such an outstanding job. He really has.
Yeah. There's a great story, as I understand it, about your best classroom for learning as a young coach had to do with your office location at University Hall. Tell our viewers about how you learned a lot about coaching from a very talented pool of ACC basketball coaches.
Well, in the early 80s, I was still coaching lacrosse, and I shared an office with Coach Adams. He was on one side, and we had a wall dividing us and a door between our offices. And a lot of soccer players would come in to my office during the day, and lacrosse players as well. And Coach Adams thought it was a little bit too disturbing and thought it would be best that I moved my office somewhere. And Jim West decided, he looked around U-Haul. In the old days, we were pretty packed in at U-Haul. Didn't have much room, and it was before the McHugh Center was built. So he decided that he was going to build me an office in the visiting team basketball locker room, which was kind of big. So he decided to cut it in half. He framed it, threw up some sheetrock from my wall and a false ceiling, and I sat in my office, and all the great coaches in America were right next to me, preparing their team for games. And I would listen to Dean Smith, Lefty Drizel, Jim Valvano, Bobby Cremens, et cetera, et cetera. And it was an amazing experience for me as a young coach. I'm listening to at the time in the 80s, the NBA still hadn't exploded, and ACC basketball was as big a sport as it was in the United States. And I'm sitting at my desk, just sheetrock between me and these great coaches and listening to their preparation before a game. I'd scramble from my seat at halftime to listen to the adjustments they made. And then after the game, how they talked to their teams. And it was one of the most unbelievable classrooms for coaching. I'd bring Gino Oriem into my office, who was then the assistant coach with the women's team, Bob Radley, who's now the coach at LAFC. And we'd sit there and listen to these coaches, and it was truly remarkable. And I learned an awful lot.
What was the wildest thing you ever heard from those conversations and stands out to you all these years later?
I'm not sure it's wild, but the personalities you see, Dean Smith was like a professor. Jim Valvano was like a comedy act in some ways, especially when the team went out for warm-ups and he was in there talking to his team. Lefty was, a few choice words Lefty laid into his team, especially at halftime when I remember there was 3 seconds left in the half and Virginia scored on an out-of-bounds play under the basket and Lefty gave those guys the riot act. But, what I learned is be who you are. I can't be Lefty Drizel. I can't be Dean Smith or Krzyzewski. I need to be Bruce Arena, and I got to coach within my personality and the way I think. And all of them thought differently, prepared differently, and it was a great lesson because young coaches kind of look for mentors and try to imitate people that they have great respect for, when in reality you got to coach within yourself, and that's a lesson I learned from that.
Bruce, you mentioned the fact that you've still got ties to Charlottesville, and speaking of young dynamic coaches who know something about being themselves and finding their own identity and forging their identity, Tony Bennett's one of those guys. I know you spent time in Charlottesville. You've come back to see them. You saw them this year. You went to the Final Four last year, as a matter of fact, as well. What was that experience like, and what is your connection to Charlottesville nowadays?
Even though I'm a graduate of Cornell University, I spent 18 years in Charlottesville and 18 years at UVA. I feel like it's my school, and I really enjoy getting there. The Final Four was one of my great experiences in sports, and it was my bucket list. I've gone to the Masters. Another bucket list was the Final Four, and I had Virginia, and it was remarkable. And to spend time with some of the former men's players that I knew as young students and the women that I coached and other athletes, it was just an amazing experience. And to see the class of the Virginia program is absolutely remarkable, and the quality of their play. And let's be honest, Tony Bennett is as good as it gets. So it was just a remarkable experience for me. And I'm jealous that I don't get to see it all the time. I'm a season ticket holder, UVA basketball. I don't buy any tickets to soccer. I make George, give me tickets to those games. But I think UVA is arguably the finest school in the country when you combine academics and athletics. So I'm real proud to still be a resident of Charlottesville and proud of the University of Virginia.
Yeah, that's great. It comes through when you talk about it, for sure. Before we let you go here, one thing I'd like to touch in on. Last summer, we mourned the loss of, you've mentioned him in our conversation, former UVA athletic director Gene Corrigan. What kind of an impact did he have on your career?
He was remarkable. And in the old days, we spent a lot of time together. And actually, my first game as the soccer coach at Virginia, we played at Hampton, Sydney, and Gene drove the van to the game, and we used to spend a lot of time playing squash. His son played for me, Kevin, on the lacrosse team. I got to know the family. We were very, very close, and later years when we both resided at Glenmore, Gene lived down the block from me, and I maintain ties with the family. I've spent time, Kevin and I get together usually once a year, and his brother Tim, who works for ESPN, we share time together, and it was remarkable. I know college athletics has changed a lot over the years, but in those days we were really family, and Gene was a great resource for me because he coached soccer at Virginia at one time, believe it or not. And his story to me was the first soccer game I ever saw was the one I coached in. So, we had a lot of close ties, and he obviously loved lacrosse, and that was the reason why I was hired at Virginia. So we spent a lot of time both on the professional level and, away from the field. And he was just a wonderful person, and his children have grown up to be great people as well. And, it was just a great experience to have the privilege of work under Gene Corrigan.
Bruce, it's been fun walking down memory lane with you here this afternoon. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and good luck navigating these turbulent, strange waters this season.
Well, thank you. I look forward to getting back to Charlottesville and supporting the Wahoos.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you around grounds, hopefully sometime soon. Again, At Home with the Who's, presented by the Supply Room, a proud sponsor of UVA Athletics. Whatever your office needs, they can get it to you with next-day shipping and unbeatable prices. Choosing your one-stop business supplier is as easy as visiting thesupplyroom.com.